2014-15. We are in an open work session, and the first section of this will be Rec and Parks, Land Preservation, Parks and Recreation Plan Update. And if you guys would introduce yourselves for the camera.
Keith Hall, Planning and Zoning.
Gary Mackus, Recreation, Parks, and Tourism.
Jack Lennox, Planning and Zoning.
Thanks for coming.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Do you guys want to talk about any changes that were made since we had this a few weeks ago, a month ago?
Sure, let's let the...
I'm going to give council the housekeeping version of where we were at since you left off at your last meeting regarding the Land Preservation, Parks and Recreation Plan. Like any plan, a consultant's going to take you only so far. At some point, you take over ownership of the document. And ownership means going over it with a fine-tooth comb and sweeping it one last time, checking all the math, checking all the dates, checking all the analysis, making sure that the data in it's the most up-to-date and recent that's available for a variety of different subjects and thematic topics. So since you last saw this draft, the staff of the Planning and Zoning Department's been through it, and really it was minor housekeeping or minor lifting that needed to take place. One of the things that we heard from the last council meeting was making sure that the dates are consistent. We've been working on this update now for the better part of 3 years. As you can imagine, version management of documents going back and forth between consultants and county staff sometimes can get to be a rather tedious process. So again, the first sweeping was going through, making sure that we got the dates to reflect 2013, Land Preservation, Parks and Recreation Plan. Some of the other more minor updates are going through, the acknowledgements page. After that, starting to really sweep the plan itself. One of the first places we started was looking at all the data tables in here, which I must say this document's about as extensive as the long-range plan when looking at different data sets, socioeconomic, housing, characteristics, Gary's park and recreation information, financial information from his budget, open space needs analysis, agricultural, ag census, you name it. All that's been updated to the most recent information, as well as all the math checked in all those tables, which is really a very fun task. If you've never done it, I recommend you do it some night if you're having problems sleeping. Really, other than that, the final sweeping of it was going through the policy recommendations. One of the shortcuts that council members can take when reviewing any real plan is going to the last chapter. The last chapter is the compilation of all the previous chapters and the highlights and what you're really carrying forward, how you're going to implement the plan. So based off council recommendations, I think at your last meeting there were some concerns about any recommendations that had any type of language that would potentially increase the real estate tax. Any type of references of that nature have been removed. In addition, like any plan, you carry over things from previous plans. This document had carried things over from both the 2005 plan as well as the 1998 comprehensive plan, in which at that time we were in a better market, the economy was doing better, development was doing better, and working with developers to get considerations as their projects came through was a lot easier. Given the downturn in the economy, where we're at today with the market, how we're trying to do economic development through the grant program for construction of single-family detached dwellings, staff felt it was only appropriate to go back through and soften some of the language, take out hard dollar figures, also get into words that are more appropriate for policy and have a less regulatory ring. Considerations should be given, working with developers, coordinating with developers, things like that, and removing words such as require. Again, that's just a sign of the time. Hopefully the economy will get back to where we were at before, and these considerations won't be so difficult from a financial standpoint. Other than that, staff's available to answer any questions you may have about the updates. Again, it was very minor housekeeping. This has been an effort that's been going on for 3 years. As we move forward with this document, as well as the long-range comprehensive plan, we will make sure that the numbers that are up to date here, if they're not up to date or if they're inconsistent with any numbers that are in the comprehensive plan, those will be modified as well.
Okay. And I see this was brought to us as Resolution 85, 2014. What action now needs to be taken, Mr. Baker, as far as, are we past the time? Are we okay with this still? Okay, so it'll come back as the same resolution?
Yes.
Okay. Are there any council questions or comments on the update?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for going over this and making the corrections and updating some of the information. Keith, just a couple of quick things, though, and I'm in, you got yours there? Okay, 510. This just doesn't, the wording on this just doesn't make sense. I think something's missing or too many words or. 510. On the funding for easement acquisition, the second paragraph down, that first sentence, it says in size of agricultural properties in the being sold and converted. Are we missing some word in there or something?
Is it
Too many
A1
words.
district?
Yes, that's exactly what it is.
So A1
You're
district.
going to add that into it? just
Yes.
To make it, okay, thank you. And then on the next page, 511, I just had another quick question. Maybe I'm reading this wrong. The last bullet on the clustering provisions, if you go down to the third line, it says, which is one equivalent dwelling unit per acre. Is that right?
511.
511,
Yeah,
third bullet, third line.
third line. It's talking about the
No.
density requirements, pardon?
No, the cluster, the Girl for higher density development contrast density requirement of a non-cluster. No, non-cluster subdivisions or conventional subdivisions are one equivalent dwelling unit per 15 acre. I think some people might like the 1 acre, but I think for,
So
to
perfect.
make sure it's consistent with our current regulations and code,
Well,
that
if you-
we change that to 15.
15 acres.
Okay, yeah, because if you go over to 512, it says 1 unit per 15 acres.
Mhm.
So, thank you. Otherwise, I think this is great. It actually was really enjoyable reading it because has a lot of good, I think it has a lot of good information in it. It really does.
Gary's done a tremendous job with this since 1988, and I don't see that stopping at this point, as well as the consultants. Urban Research and Development Corporation out of Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. They've been working on Gary's plans updates since 1988 now. 82, wow, even longer. As well as Gary's staff and planning and zoning staff for having the opportunity to go through it. In addition, it just makes it all that much easier as we move forward with the comprehensive plan to make sure we take the information here that's applicable and roll it right into the plan.
There is some here that is applicable there,
Yes.
definitely.
Okay.
Gary, last time you were in on this, you made a statement about the amount of land that was developed in Wycomico County, and I think your number was 14%. Is that correct?
Actually, a little less than 14.
So what, is that a little less than 14? You mean
13 point something.
13 point something of total land area in Wycomico
Total
County
land max.
is developed? Okay. Can I ask you where you got that number?
It's in here.
I mean, you put it in.
Because it's in.
Did you put it in there?
Think about how that came up. After 3 or 4 years back, it was a process just looking at land use maps. And you go through here and you morph it over development and,
Well, yeah, you
So it
figured, you
came out.
figured it out from all the numbers you had, I guess.
Yeah.
It just, I thought that was we hear about how we're overdeveloped and everything, and I thought that was a pretty low number when you're taking only 13 point something percentage of our property and the whole county is
I agree
developed.
with you. I think the other thing that's real interesting is when we talk about forest land conservation, that almost 40, the high 40% is in forest land, which is undeveloped as well, but yet, we're in the mitigation and all those types of things, and we have an abundance of forest lands in Wycomico County. So, yeah, there's some real interesting statistics in this matter.
Thank you.
Any other council comments or questions on this?
Just a question as far as any conferences coming up with regards to green infrastructure. I mean, there was a time, like maybe a few years ago, where there's constant conversation about green infrastructure. I think there were several workshops over at Salisbury University and so on and so forth. I mean, the topic is still relevant. I was just curious as educational wise? Anything on the horizon, anything coming up? that you're
Well,
aware
one
of?
thing we can talk about locally, excuse me, is the Natural Resources Conservation Advisory Committee, which is a committee that was established by the county. They meet monthly. I think it's the third Wednesday of every month. Their agendas are available or should be available on the county website, and we'll double check on the county website to make that they're getting on there.
So Kate, they're meeting now?
They are
At
meeting,
some
yes.
point they weren't.
Right.
They are actively meeting, and one of the things that they're really engaged in is the green infrastructure. You know, going back to water quality improvements, all that, I mean, one of the most effective, cost-effective methods to reduce sediments and nutrients to getting into our waterways is for trees to absorb them.
Right.
However, it is a balance. It's, like Gary said, it's very difficult in unincorporated portions of the county to even find public land where you can plant a tree where there's not already trees planted. So that is a challenge, and it's a balancing act. We're just very fortunate to have that level of natural resources in the county. But we'll make sure that the county website has the agendas for that group, and they'll be available for the public, and the meetings are open to the public as well.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so is council okay with putting this on the next agenda as resolution 85?
Yes, I
No,
am.
yep,
Okay,
please, thank you.
great, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Gary.
And I thank everyone for their hard work on it.
Yeah, it's a good document.
Mr. Madhall, I was just gonna ask, do I need to reproduce this again for you guys
No.
to you have your copies?
Right.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah, we made the changes.
thank you very much.
About just changing the one page from where it has 50% to 15%.
That's
I will send an email to council of the two changes, and there's probably going to be one or two minor ones as well that go along with that.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so next we are going to have our open work session on the comp plan / tier map. I know that several council members have probably had some discussions with some of the public since our last meeting, so I don't know, does anybody have a suggestion on how we start this?
I do. I think we ought to put it all off till the next council, honestly, because we have 7 meetings, including this meeting, of this council left, and I still think there's a lot of things to go through on this comp plan as well as the tier maps that we just don't have time to get it done and done right. And I believe that we're kind of a lame duck here. There's going to be at least 4 new council members on here in 95 days or 100 days. So we're going to be rushing to try to get this through. I'd like to make a proposal that we put it off to the next council session.
Well, when I ran for election 4 years ago, I was voted for a 4-year term, and that term, is up December 2nd at 6 o'clock. I don't feel like I'm a lame duck. I'm still serving the citizens and serving them to the best of my knowledge. Some of the members on this council that have been here for a while have worked on this and I'm talking about the comp plan right now. Some of us have worked on the comp plan, and I feel it would be irresponsible at this point to throw it in a new council's lap with that council. It could be composed of at least 2, 3, 4, 5 new council members. And, there is a very long learning curve when it comes to the comprehensive plan. So I would like us to really have a goal of at least looking at the comprehensive plan and getting it to a point where, that's okay.
Sorry.
Agree that, that we adopt the comprehensive plan, and with adjustments if council members concur, and if we can come to a decision on that, and possibly taking the tier map and maybe just, without better words, pushing kicking that can down the road for right now.
How's other council feel?
Well, I guess one of the things that I asked at the last meeting was, what timeline were we looking at? Were we able to back the dates out and really see what this looks like, given the fact there's only, 7 council meetings before we do end our term? So that may have that might play into the decision of whether or not we continue to move forward and fulfill this duty, or do we need to naturally make the next council,
Right.
be responsible for this? I don't know, so I'm just curious as to what those dates look like.
I can address that. From a comprehensive plan standpoint, your draft plan is ready to go. Your draft plan requires a public hearing of this body and an action to be taken by resolution. Now, as it relates to the growth tier map, the growth tier map ultimately has to go to the Maryland Department of Planning for a review process. If the Maryland Department of Planning feels there's any consistency with our local plans, policies, and programs as it relates to the law of SB 236 versus our tier map, they will require this body to hold a public hearing. So I've worked on some dates. Roughly the county, being the executive and the council, would need to submit a map to the Maryland Department of Planning by October 13th. And that is contingent upon a 3-week review period by the Maryland Department of Planning. In addition, that was also based off no special meetings, which I know can occur, as well as a November 18th sunset date, which it was my understanding that that is the last legislative date for this body to take actions, that the new council will be sworn in on December 2nd.
Keith, can you clarify something for me, please? If council proceeds and adopts the comprehensive plan, either this council or a new council would have to review and analyze, like you said, the tier map. Because we adopt the comprehensive plan, that does not have any bearings on the tier map? Am I right or wrong on that? I need clarification.
You're absolutely right, because you already have an adopted comprehensive plan.
Wait a minute, say that again?
You have an adopted comprehensive plan. You could push this plan to the side. It doesn't make a difference. This plan is just an update. You already have a plan that you would be evaluated against when it comes to a tier map. You already have zoning that you would be evaluated against. You already have a water and sewer plan that you would be evaluated against. So the adoption of this plan does not impact anything. As a matter of fact, if you're talking about purely from a land use perspective, the adoption of this plan that's in front of you is actually less restrictive for the area identified potentially as a tier 4, or what would be a tier 4 based on our ag zoning, than the current 1998 plan.
Do you have some specifics that you could speak to on that?
Absolutely, it's not a problem.
And
Did
just
you-
as an overview, the reason, you might say, well, why is it less restrictive?
That's-
We followed the 2004 zoning, and all the time that the county and the council took to enact the new zoning code, which has held up pretty well now for 10 years, that zoning map was, in certain places, more permissive than the 98 comp plan.
Jack, in that 2004 zoning, and I think I asked you this before, there were 2 floating districts.
Yes.
Is that still in this?
It's in the text of the zoning code. So that would come up when we do the zoning code. And speaking personally, we would make changes on that.
Right.
But that's not in the comp plan, that's in the zoning. But in terms of the zoning map, that's what we're following. There's no proposed down zones, and that's why it's even a little bit more permissive than the comp plan you have in effect right now.
Correct.
The 98 plan.
For example, around rural villages, and your 1998 plan, it's literally called a land use designation of rural village. They're very small. As in comparison to your 2004 zoning, I believe there might have been a zoning map in the packet that was part of your briefing book. Also, when you look at the area between Willards and Pittsville and the unincorporated area, when you look at that from a land use plan perspective in your current 1998 plan, that's ag resource.
In between.
In between, whereas when you look at your zoning, that is town transition. So these are areas that were once A1 that have gone to a more permissive or less restrictive use. So when you're looking plan to plan, again, the overall total acreage of what the agricultural resource land use classification would be is decreased in the 2014 plan. And it really goes back to predicated on the 2004 zoning, and to a lesser extent, the municipal growth elements that came in front of this body as the municipalities were updating their plans.
Well, there is a lot of information in the comprehensive plan, but I think the appetite for the most interest, though, is in the land use.
Without question.
Yeah.
And that's why we feel it's very important to come here today and highlight, this is the same plan. As a matter of fact, it's less restrictive. It is getting our zoning consistent with our land use, because right now there is a little bit of inconsistency there. There are no down zonings. There are up zonings as a result of housekeeping. And these things happen from time to time. That's why we go back and evaluate these on a 6 or 10-year period. And this is our opportunity to do so. And a lot of what has gone into this plan from a land use perspective, as we were talking about the last meeting, it has been in front of this legislative body. It has been in front of you as a water resources element, which is a new chapter here. It's been in front of you as municipal growth elements. It's been in front of you as part of the water and sewer plan update in 2010. All these documents are combined to come up with a stage, or at least something to get the land use plan presentable. And fortunately, we're working off a very good plan from the 1998 plan. The 1998 plan, when you go out and poll the public didn't have a problem with the plan per se. The problem was with the implementation. It was about the density of the zoning in the ag zoning district. Along came Senate Bill 236.
Yeah.
That ship has sailed. Why it's still very prevalent and it's still very important, and I don't want to diminish the importance of that, it has taken a lot of the scrutiny of the plan and removed it.
Gail, if you don't mind, as our, kind of the council representative on the planning
I've
commission.
been pushing on the planning commission to have this before council, so this council could make a decision on this plan.
Okay.
That's been one of my things before we have a new council who have to educate themselves, and our planning department has to educate them, and they're gonna have enough on their plates when they first start, because, there's so much they have to learn.
I guess-
Mrs. Barkovich, did the Planning and Zoning Board unanimously adopt, or adopt?
They recommended
it
send
unanimously.
to
A
us.
favorable recommendation was unanimous.
I suppose, well, my biggest problem, I guess, with that would be, is the Planning and Zoning Commission unanimously favorable recommendation on the endorsement here of the, what do you call this, the PPA?
The priority preservation area element.
Yeah, I just can't agree with that, and I'm surprised that the Planning Commission actually endorsed
Well,
that.
that was kind of put on our desks at the end, after we already had made the recommendation to send the book, the comp plan to you. That was added in at the end.
It was an
And it
addendum.
really was, we had already had our public hearing, so there has not been a public hearing on that piece. As it's been said, I guess it's online, so if the public does
It's
want to see
online. A
what it
public
says.
hearing is not
Right.
required for an addendum.
Right.
It did go through the Planning and Zoning Commission, and I believe that was almost a unanimous recommendation forwarded to the council as well for your consideration.
The council is the one who does make the final decision on this. The planning commission can only make a recommendation, but we are the legislative body to make the final decisions.
Are you asking us to accept this comp plan with this addendum into it?
I personally don't like the addendum. I think I would rather wait after I've had a chance to look at it and study it and leave that out of the comp plan for now.
Well, that's one of my strongest points against this comp plan, if this is included in it,
The addendum.
the addendum.
Okay.
Yes. I think that sets.
But we don't have to, we can take that out.
This,
It does not have to be
this
included.
takes us back to about 2008, when the down zoning thing.
Well, and just for full disclosure, the addendum, regardless of how you vote, it is a necessary element of the comprehensive plan should the county proceed with seeking certification from the Maryland Agricultural Land Preservation Foundation. When looking at the map that was a part of that addendum, it's important to realize we're not saying all this land is going to be preserved by regulation. We're not saying all of it's going to be preserved by policy. What we're doing is trying to get certified again, so whatever little bit of state money that is trickling down, that we can get above the 33% we're currently getting, we're going to take that money and do things with it to get for preservation easements. In addition, What you're really looking at is we did not want to restrict it or limit it to only certain property owners. If a property owner would like to preserve their land, they will have the ability to apply just like they would today.
I understand the point of trying to get within the levels that you need to, but is that being done at the cost of a landowner when their property is being downzoned? I mean, are we doing that?
The
You know,
PPA does not,
For us to get more money for that, is it gonna be done at the cost of somebody's property values? I guess that's what I'm saying.
the PPA doesn't designate zoning, correct?
No, the PPA does not designate zoning.
Would it be appropriate to ask the question, as the prior to preservation map now exists, apart from enhancing our eligibility for MALF funding as it might become available, what other impact does the PPA have on property that's in that zone? How does it impact the land use any differently than if it wasn't in that zone? Does it?
No, it does not.
So what is?
The impacts that you might be referring to would inherently be there with zoning, with land use. They're already there. This is not adding a new layer.
Well, the concerns
Of regulation.
we're hearing is that this PPA, I'm gonna call it layer, further restricts the use of this land, and you're
No.
saying it doesn't.
No, it's a voluntary, again, it would not automatically require a property owner to force them into a sale of their property.
And
It would be voluntarily agreement with the property owner and the county, just like the state program and the current county program, if that person would elect to sell an easement. As far as that person's personal decision of the value of the easement, that's something they will work out with the county or with the state to where they can either come to terms or they don't come to terms.
But when we send our tier map, oh,
Go ahead.
good. When we send our tier map up and they look at our comp plan and they say, okay, you've got the PPA that says everything in zone A1 is now basically tier 4, they're gonna say, well, that's what we're expecting, right?
They're going to say the law, they're going to look at your county zoning of what's resource protection, ag preservation. They're going to say that's tier 4. And we're just going to be able to happen to say our PPA is consistent with that.
Yeah, but then that
I
does
think,
not-
I think whether we had PPA
Or
whether
not.
it's A1.
Your A1 is supposed to be limited to tier 4.
Right, the state would still make that argument.
Yeah, I still,
Regardless.
It doesn't,
of the PPA.
but I
I
understand.
still have that problem, you know.
I understand your
state,
point.
You know, and I just
Yeah.
don't see that limiting
Well, you know,
rights
this
for that.
also can be something that, this priority preservation area could be something for the next council to discuss too. I mean, no, not that I want to push it down the line, but, you know, as I say, it was added on the data. This is, you know, June 6th. We've been working on this since 2010. And, you know, the difference is, as Mr. Hall says, 75% versus 33%. But if we don't have a tier map and we can only do a maximum of 7, you know, is it better to get 33% of 7 or
I think the thought being
75%
is
of
that
7?
we didn't want to leave 42% on the table, even if it's minimal right now. However, it is at the discretion of the council. Staff would recommend that the addendum is considered as part of the draft plan as presented to council, and any action on the draft plan would include that, but that is purely a recommendation, especially if getting MALF certification is important.
I see we have audience members here who are interested in this. This is an open work session, but I would take any comments if anybody has any at this time.
Only nice comments, right?
Only nice comments.
Only nice comments, whether you agree or disagree. Pete, did you hear that?
I
He's
think
not-
she
Pete,
said she agreed to disagree.
Did you hear me?
What's that?
I said only nice comments, whether you agree or disagree.
I always have nice comments, Steve.
Thank you.
My concern is if we pass this comp plan, or even review this comp plan, that when we go to the state, we will have no negotiating level with the tier map, because our comp plan becomes our tier map. Now, we've pretty much agreed to wait till after this current government is, the next governor is elected, we have a new council people, before we pursue coming up with a viable tier map. And I think we should work on simultaneously coming up with a satisfactory tier map for the state and a satisfactory comp plan, or comp plan that we can live with. I urge you not to vote on pursuing this comp plan in the last hours of your administration, that we give us time to wait out who the new governor is, who the new director of planning is, and at that time, I think we can negotiate with them. We are a unique county with unique soil maps. We need to try to have unique consideration for the Department of Planning, and I think we should make our comp plan and our tier map, approve them simultaneously, and they should be compatible.
Will you respond to that, Keith? You said the comp plan becomes a tier map, basically. Is this true?
The comprehensive plan is a component that goes into the tier map as it specifically relates to land use. Land use translates to zoning. I understand Mr. Richardson's point, and it's a very legitimate concern. However, I think when predicating that sentence, it's very important for this council to realize if the one reason that you will not move this plan forward is because you don't want to back yourself into a corner with a tier map by having a comprehensive plan, you have a comprehensive plan. And as a matter of fact, you have a comprehensive plan that is more restrictive as it would relate to anything potentially as a tier 4.
Yes.
Robert Taylor, Salisbury. The good news is that I only found out about this meeting this afternoon, or I'd have you here for probably until 10 o'clock. There are so many things about this 200-plus page report that I think are potential problems that I think it, number one, should not be adopted as it is, and frankly, I think the next council should do it. They're the ones that are going to have to live with it. I realize, Ms. Prettyman, it does take some time to get up to speed, but, you know, if these folks who are running don't want to do the investment, they shouldn't be elected. I think that after the election, they would have plenty of time. There's no need to pass it by December, January, February, or even this time next year. But turning to some of the points, you all have been focusing on one aspect of it, and I think you need to look at maybe a little bit larger picture. About 5 years ago, there was a case in the Court of Appeals called the Terrapin Run case. I know Mr. Baker is familiar with it, from Western Maryland. In that particular decision, the Court of Appeals ruled that a comprehensive plan is just that. It's a plan. It does not necessarily need to be followed in zoning decisions. The Department of Planning went bananas. And in the very next session of the legislature, there was the anti-Terrapin Run legislation that I think was about 5 years ago, Jack, that passed, I think. I'm not talking about 236. I'm not talking about
Talking about Senate Bill 280, I believe.
Yeah, whatever. I
Yes.
mean, the numbers get
We're very
confusing because
familiar
we
with
get
it.
so many of them each year from the Department of Planning. But what that says is, no, the comp plan has to be considered. It essentially makes it as if it were part of the zoning code, even though it's not labeled as such. It's not passed as an ordinance. It's adopted by resolution, as you heard a few minutes ago. But nevertheless, it has the force of law. Because what that legislation says is that in your zoning decisions, meaning your zoning laws themselves, the different districts where they're going to be located, it also goes into administrative decisions, rezonings, spot rezonings, special exceptions, variances, that has to follow the dictates, if you want to call it that, or the visions or whatever, there's all kinds of buzzwords, of the comprehensive plan. We have a plan, as I said, it's over 200 pages. It is chocked full of goals, objectives, desires, this, that, and the other. Half of them, if you put them one half against the other, are probably conflicting. But the way the law is crafted, and I'm talking about the state law now, what I've been talking about, it's more or less crafted on the basis that if there's something in there and you're not following that vision, you can't do it. There haven't been a whole lot of decisions under this new law that I mentioned because there hasn't been a whole lot of development in the state of Maryland. There really haven't been many zoning cases decided by the appeals courts in Maryland for 5 years now. So that's my first problem, is that we have something that's chock full of things that if you go through it and look at it, you would think, how can we ever interpret this? Now, getting back to what you've been talking about on the tier plans and the effect of the comprehensive plan, as I say, it will have the force of law. I understand what Keith is pointing out about the town transition zones. Yes, you have some areas, part of which are now, I guess, in ag districts. Some maybe not be in ag districts, they might be in others, that are in these town transition zones. And to that extent, this proposed plan, the maps part of it, may be less restrictive. But get beyond those town transition areas, and it flips the other way. Now, what's going to happen is, when you look through, for example, the agricultural section of this, priority preservation area element, it is the intent of the county to prepare an amendment to this comprehensive plan at a later date. So it's going to come, part of it anyway is going to come before the next council, just because of those words there, and the time schedule you've just heard spoken about. So I'd say give the whole thing to the next council, but that's a side point. But what this is doing is binding you to something that is going to pass muster with the state. And that's what you're going to run into when the tier maps come up. If this plan is passed, you're essentially dictating what the tier maps are going to be. I may disagree with that on Keith. I mean, I respect his views, but I think when you look at the state zoning legislation, when you look at the language in here, and of course when you look at the Department of Planning's game plan for things, you can read the handwriting on the wall. Now, turning to some other points on it, and just some little, I mean, there's some other things. I think it needs a lot of work, not just the ag part. The Metro Core, if you look at the maps, the Metro Core is the same as it's been, I think, for 30 years. Matt Kramer probably is the expert on this. I don't think that's changed.
I don't know about the expert part, but I think you're right about it.
Yeah, and I mean, do you honestly think that in the last 35 years or 30 years, there's been no expansion of our Metro Core? I mean, if you do, you must have your head under a rock. You go down Campground Road, which is the dividing line, and you look on either side of Campground Road, and you couldn't tell which side the Metro Core was on if you didn't have the map in your hand. And you see that if you look at your land use map, that is one of the maps. I tried to print them out today, but for some reason our printer was on the fritz. But when you look at the land use, I'm talking about the existing land use map. There are two land use maps. There's existing and then there's an actual plan. And you look at the areas that are not agricultural, that are outside of the Metro Core, and I think it hits you right between the eyes. The Metro Core doesn't really define what the Metro Core is in 2014. It may have been that way in 1984, but it's not that way now. That's a point. Another point that, frankly, I think is bizarre, and I did bring this up to the plan. Incidentally, let me take a moment. I did come to a number of the Planning Commission meetings, but, you know, I work for a living. I can't come to all of them. I came to a few of them where, for some reason, it was on the agenda, but nothing was discussed. And I've made some suggestions, but not many of them saw the light of day. One of the suggestions I had was, if you look at, it's page 416, you don't turn to it, I'll tell you what it says. It talks about cooperating environmental groups, and it lists the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, the Maryland Environmental Trust, the Wicomico Environmental Trust, Friends of the Nanticoke River, Nanticoke Watershed Alliance, and then there are others. Now, I don't think, first of all, it gives them, in any kind of a zoning proceeding, a special status. Look, we're mentioned in the zoning plan, or pardon me, the comprehensive plan, as being one of the organizations that we're cooperating with. Now, in case you've forgotten, the Chesapeake Bay Foundation is one of the ones that's opposing the supporting the TMDL plan, the EPA plan, in the federal case that's now before the Third Circuit in Philadelphia. The Wycomico Environmental Trust, as you probably know, has opposed many zoning actions here in the county. That's a political action group, in part. There's no reason why any organization, frankly, I don't think it's the Farm Bureau or any other, should be named in this report in a way that's going to give them some kind of special status. As I say, I didn't have too much time to prepare, fortunately for you all. But I just don't think that there's any reason to go ahead with this plan at this time, and in this particular position that we're in 3 months before an election, where we know that at least 4 members of the council are going to change. Let the council that's going to live with this be the one that adopts it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I got a question about that. That's Mr.
Taylor. Yep.
That was an interesting, other counties' comprehensive plans, do they include, like I say, I guess Farm Bureau, or the Farmers Associations could be in here as well as these, but basically what we've got is, like Mr. Taylor said, some of the more, environmental groups. Does other counties?
It's not uncommon that a plan and the different elements of it would have the partners that you work with. By mentioning of any partner, entity, or non-government organization, it does not give them an advantage as it comes to comprehensive planning issues or rezoning. And one of the things I want to talk about that Mr. Taylor spoke of was Senate Bill 280. Be careful of interpretation. You would not get that level of an interpretation from the Attorney General for the Maryland Department of Planning in the state of Maryland. Every word that is in here is a policy document. Are we looking for consistency between our policies and our planning and zoning tools that we use, like zoning and water and sewer planning? Absolutely, without question. However, does by mere mention of having some recommendation in a plan automatically codify it and force this county to codify any recommendation? That is not the situation here that we're dealing with. This is a non-binding policy document. You can almost look at it as a la carte. You pull from it the good things that you can really support, and some of the things you just can't support, they might sit on the shelf. Again, talking about inconsistency, the bigger inconsistency here lies today with the 1998 comprehensive plan and the 2004 zoning.
Keith, it was brought up about the Metro Corp.
Yes.
Metro Corp, it was in the 98 county land use plan and never, ever, to my knowledge, adopted by the county council.
The 1997 Metro Core plan was not adopted by the council. It was adopted by the city of Salisbury. Right. Subsequently, it has been replaced
by the urban.
By the city of Salisbury, the city of Fruitland, and the town of Delmar. Right. Now have their own plans.
And so we are no longer referring to Metro Core.
I'm glad you mentioned that point, and I didn't bring it up with Gary's plan. I think it's only appropriate that we start where we can, separating ourselves from certain vernacular. And one of the things we did with Gary's plan was any references to the Metro Core have now been called the Metropolitan Growth Area. It's a small change.
Or is it the urban growth area?
It could be either. It could
because
really.
I think the comprehensive plan.
It could be either of them.
Refers to it as the urban growth boundary.
It is a more urbanized area.
Okay.
So that is something we are working on as well.
Well, map 7-1 in this new book has right up here, Metro Core. Here's
Yes.
the black line dotted all the way around.
Yes, Gary's plan just got updated, and we'll be rolling these into this plan as well.
Yeah.
In which I'm glad you brought out that map 7-1, Because one of the things when you start hearing about, is the metro core too small? Is the metro core too big? Is there a need for it to expand based off development in the past 30 years? Really start looking at the land use and the land cover. And you see some of these areas that are being spoken about near Upper Ferry Road and Walnut Tree Road. They're predominantly forest. Some could make the same argument about the neighborhoods out by Deer Harbor, Fox Chase, Elk Creek. However, they are surrounded predominantly by working agricultural farms. Those were subdivisions that came in at a time and date in the county where you could have small lot subdivisions in the A1 zoning district. That's now changed.
Just one other question, and you may have answered this. It's been said that not once but twice, this has the force of law if we
Yes.
adopt it.
Yes.
It does?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I was just saying, I was agreeing with you. Yes, that's been said twice.
Okay. Can you
People
explain that?
are going to say and have a lot of interpretations of what a comprehensive plan is, and more importantly, what a comprehensive plan isn't. Ultimately, we are not the attorney generals. What we know is from experience. These, again, are policy documents. When you have a position in policy, especially as it relates to a land use plan, do you want your policy consistent with something that regulates like zoning? Yes, that's the purpose for documents like these. However, if this document says we have a preservation goal of 550 acres a year, if we don't meet it, you're not going to see some regulatory control be brought to this county. Again, these are recommendations as we move forward. This is a roadmap. It's to get us from where we're at today for the next 30 years so that we can accommodate the future growth and development in an orderly manner.
Could I ask Mr. Baker's response to that?
Yep.
Yes.
And any advice to us on the issue of regulatory comprehensive plans?
Well, what I could say is the Department of Planning would love for it to be regulatory. The universal position of county attorneys, it's a policy document.
Thank you.
Ms. Ashanti, you've been,
Didn't know we were gonna get into a debate, but I urged them to look at the Terrapin Run case in the legislation.
okay.
If they hadn't wanted to reverse the Terrapin Run case, they wouldn't have passed the legislation.
Ms. Ashanti, thank you.
Mayor Ashanti, basically I have some questions. One is, why did planning and zoning recommend passing this plan, except for the addendum?
I'm personally saying I'm not sure, I'm not comfortable with the addendum. No, we don't recommend passing it. We make a recommendation that it's time to send it to the council and then let them follow the process too, which means we have to have a public hearing so there is more public input. Because remember, the planning commission members, they're volunteers, and I know everybody appreciates having them as volunteers, but they are not the ones who make the final laws and regulations in the county. It's the elected officials. So, I mean, it could have sat in their hands forever, but it was going nowhere. So it was time to move it on to the next step, at least my opinion.
Okay.
And get it rolling.
So, what is and this is for, I guess, the gentleman, what is the benefit of passing this comp plan without the tier map and the addendum? Is there a benefit or a risk?
Ultimately, I want to defer that to council because it is their decision. However, from a planning perspective, if you were to adopt the plan without the addendum, without what we call this priority preservation area, it could be perceived by some that literally you're kicking the can down the road because you passed the guts or the foundation of what makes up the priority preservation area element. Now, from a program standpoint, if the council elects not to adopt that priority preservation area element, that's a mouthful, then the county cannot apply to have its ag program recertified by the state. And you ask, what does that mean? Right now, without certification, any ag transfer tax that happens on properties that transfer their use in our ag zoning to a more intense or non-ag use, we get 33% on this tax. By being in this program, we get 75% of this tax
But
that's
Keith, is
collected.
anybody transferring ag land? Is there,
There's
there money there?
there's very minimal money today.
So how much are
But-
we talking about?
You're probably talking about a difference of maybe $20,000 over a few-year period.
Or how many year?
Few-year period.
So-
However, that's $20,000 that's getting left on a table that another county with a priority preservation area will get. It doesn't mean that it's going to be at this rate every year. If you want to look at it over the long trend, you could be losing hundreds of thousands of dollars
That's
annually.
what I was trying to say earlier. Are we gonna sacrifice, not the person who's trying to get their land in this area, are we gonna sacrifice somebody else's property values at a greater sacrifice than what we're gaining in a $20,000 donation to the county, to a tax? You know, is it gonna cost somebody else, you know, more than that? That's.
I understand your
you know,
concerns.
what I'm trying to
Yes.
say. I'm not saying it very well, but.
No, I think you are. I understand your concerns completely.
The other one is and I said, why not schedule a public hearing and let the public, listen to all the pros and cons and ask the questions and whatever, instead of just, I have a concern, and I agree with Councilwoman Prettyman, I have a concern with pushing it aside because this is election year or whatever. I think if the public, at the public hearing, if they said push it aside, then fine. But I think the public should have a decision in this situation. So I really would recommend, I'm not speaking for the NAACP now, I would recommend that there be a public hearing and let the public make a decision on this. And the other thing is, this is August, and some important things will come before you. I hope that you don't let the fact that there's an election coming up have anything to do with, I agree with Councilwoman Prettyman. I would like to see you to work until the end, because this is what you swore to do. So I can't accept, let's push it, give it to someone else because we don't have much time. That's not acceptable. And that's not meant to be disrespectful, but it's not acceptable.
I still like to push this off because we've been an hour and some minutes talking about just the logistics of it all.
Sure.
And we haven't even gotten to the point of actually going through the meat of this, and I believe we should go through a chapter or two chapters a night. And if we've got time to go through it, I'm still willing to work on it. That's not a problem.
Well, I'm willing to do work sessions every night, if you want to.
Really?
Yes. Why wouldn't I? If you want to go through chapter by chapter, I mean, we can meet Monday through Friday.
I'm good with that. Set that up. I'll be good with that.
Okay. If everybody else is.
I want to hear Ms. Lucas.
Hi.
Karen Lucas, Wycomico Environmental Trust. I guess I agree with Councilwoman Prettyman and Mrs. Ashanti about not kicking this down the road. I think the Planning Commission, when I started at the Wycomico Environmental Trust, you were already, 3.5 years ago, already working on this. And I think there has been a lot of thought that's put into this. This plan shouldn't be hijacked by one issue. This plan has community development in it. It has other things that really need to be updated and go forward. The last plan was in 1998. That's 16 years ago. You're supposed to update your plan every 6 years. Let's just get on with it, you know? And I just find it really frustrating to hear folks come up and say, well, there are a million things in here that need to be changed. Well, this plan has been on the county website for all this time. My organization has submitted multiple comments, practically none of which have found their way into the plan. So don't think you've been stepped upon, Mr. Taylor. And, you know, the tier map is a difficult thing. And I don't know whether, I don't think the two need to be, you know, cheek to cheek. The plan is the plan. And the zoning reflects the plan. The zoning is the law. The plan, as Keith says, is a map. It's it's your aspirational map. Just say yes and get it over with. And give the council the hard part, which is the tier map, the next council.
I had read through the comprehensive plan, and there's possibly a lot of it that I've missed or whatever. But I've never seen a mention of the opt-out request when you were talking about the tier maps, that we attempted to do that. That was never put in the comp plan. I was wondering why that wasn't mentioned.
It's in here, isn't it?
Is it in there?
I
That we
thought
did an
so.
opt-out? Did I miss it?
I don't
I see
know.
the map, but I
Well,
just.
that's what
No,
I.
that's a supplemental.
It's a map.
Yeah, I was just looking in the front when you were talking, when we were talking about the tier maps. I was wondering why that wasn't mentioned.
If it's not mentioned, I would say it's not an oversight. Again, that's something that the county's working on. The county council, that could be a direction the county council goes, or ultimately it could be one that they elect not to go.
Well, I realize that. and
So,
that'll come
the
when we
importance.
discuss the tier map, but what I was getting at is it wasn't mentioned when we were, when I can't really think which page it's on.
It would be probably in chapter 1 when you start looking under Senate bill.
Yeah.
For 1.8,
Yeah,
how,
1.8, yeah, I just noticed that it wasn't mentioned, that the council had made attempts to the public, you know, nothing was brought out about that, so.
no.
That's okay.
That is just saying what the law is, not what the efforts to comply with the law are. And fortunately, speaking about the opt-out, you know, that is something that's been highly visible. It's been on the county website. We've sent out 3,500 postcards. I wish we could send out 3,500 postcards to get people to read the plan. I don't think that's going to happen, but it's just literally, it's what the laws are, not what our feelings are towards them, pro or con.
Well, thank you.
Mr. Cannon?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President, Council. John Cannon, Wycomico County. Very interesting discussion. First of all, Jack and Keith, it's an excellent document. I mean, for someone to put this type of work together, it's very phenomenal as far as the in-depth detail of everything that's covered for Wycomico County, whether you're for or against all the issues. My concerns tonight is it appears as if, to a certain degree, the council is being asked to pass something maybe with their eyes closed. I don't think that should be the way it is. There was a lot of discussion here tonight, has been, referencing whether or not this is a legally binding document. Well, you should treat it as if it's a legally binding document. I wouldn't suggest that this council pass something, you know, with the qualifier that, well, it's not legally binding, so it's okay to go ahead and send it on to the next level. I think you should treat it as if it's legally binding and take it that seriously. The suggestion on the work sessions, I think, is good. This is as important as the budget. And I know how many hours this council spent on this year's budget and past year's budgets. The comprehensive plan is just as important, if not more important, than the actual budgets that you've been passing year to year. So, yeah, if you have to spend more time on it, I would say go ahead and do that. And I think, in all honesty, with the institutional knowledge that you do have on this council, that I would like to see this council make that decision, no matter what the circumstances might be for the next council. I think Gail touched on it. There's a lot of institutional knowledge with everyone here, and I think maybe you'd want to try to make a decision on it. And I know it's not easy, but I think you might want to consider that. Thank you.
Well, Mr. President, do you want to start setting up some work sessions on it?
We can do that. How's council feel about additional work sessions on this to try to get this done in a time frame? If we are going to go chapter by chapter, as Mr. Culver said, we will need more than the 6 meetings that are left.
Well, why don't we do them like 3 days a week? Like a Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday, or something like that?
Would you like, Melissa sends out a budget schedule?
Mm-hmm.
Would you like to do something like that?
Sure.
When council's members would be available, like you set up your budget meetings?
Yes, today's what, August 5th?
Are you referring to daytime meetings? Are
Yeah.
you referring to evening meetings?
Evening meetings work better for me.
Evening.
Yep.
Well, can these gentlemen be here in the evenings too?
Now,
Mr. Strasburg allow that?
I think we need to.
That's another question.
I think we need to keep in mind next week we're at Mako,
Okay.
and that's Wednesday through Saturday.
Okay.
So maybe if we could get a couple meetings in this week, say like tomorrow, Thursday, Friday.
In the evenings.
Yeah.
I'm
It'd
sorry,
have
for
to-
me,
have
my
meetings.
week's already planned for this week, so I mean, I can start changing schedules next week, but
Well, next week we have Mako. So we're back down to a council meeting basically on the 19th again. August.
Can everybody else make it this week?
I mean, I just got to say a couple of things. When we took office, or no, let me back up. When we were running for office, the comp plan was one of the main issues, and that was a concern. And we heard each forum was question after question about the importance of this document. I'm in favor of completing this task while I'm serving on the county council. With regards to our meetings and making this truly beneficial, I would request or suggest that we not haphazardly do that, to just say, let's do tomorrow night and Thursday and Friday, without truly looking at the reality of it is, I mean, we have families. I work 3 other jobs. And while I am willing to make this happen and to see this through, but I think it needs to be done in a fashion that we're able to do. I mean, next week, yes, we are working. We're going to Mako. Nighttime and daytime is all inclusive, and that's what we're here to do. The following week, sure, I'll be willing to do that. But to sit here and say tonight and tomorrow and Friday night, I personally can't do that.
So let's try to start scheduling the week of August 18th. We'll have Melissa send out some dates that the council chambers are available in the evening.
And we're gonna have homework assignments?
Yes,
Oh, and there will be testing.
yes.
Yes.
Or would council rather look at, come in on a Saturday and do the whole Saturday? Like, I don't know, from 9 until 3 o'clock.
We have till October 13th, correct?
Well, we have to have a
No,
public
you have until November 18th.
November 18th.
But don't we have to have a public hearing on it?
Yeah.
Yes, but you could do the public hearing on your last legislative meeting on November 18th if you wanted to run it up to that. Staff,
Or if you really
Was-
wanted to hear the public's input before you make a decision, you could have it early.
I think that's where staff is leaning at for a recommendation for this council to consider is moving forward with a public hearing. A public hearing does not lock you in to an adoption of the plan immediately. And it's going to let you have that type of public input that will help you guide your discussions. I know that's what helped us in formulating the plan, was going out and getting that public participation, finding out what was important, and then putting that within the document, and then putting that document back out for feedback, good and bad.
Well, let's see what progress we make in August and September. And then in October, we can have a public hearing if it's leading to that.
Yeah, didn't the planning commission have public hearings?
Yes.
The Planning Commission had a
Yeah, but we
public
still have
hearing.
it.
Yes,
Just
and
one?
Just one, but the planning had over 40 meetings open to the public. We've done over 13 meetings open to the public, extensive public outreach. I mean, I don't think there's many voices, many stories, many complaints, many compliments we haven't heard at this point.
Why don't we schedule our first session at our next council meeting on the 19th? I don't know how much is on the agenda at that
Work
point.
session?
For at least, maybe we can get through a couple chapters.
A lot of the chapters are, as Ms. Barkovich said, it's just tabular information. It is what it is. We can get through those very quickly. In addition, I recommend that the council really cut to the chase in the document, go to chapter 14.
Well, and I understand that, but I think
But
Mr.
for full,
Mr.
absolutely.
Culver wanted to go through each
A-
chapter.
Absolutely, and we can do that as well.
All right, so Melissa, you'll send out a schedule starting on the 18th of when council chambers are available?
I thought your first work session was on the 19th.
Let's do it, start the week of the 18th, that way
To
we
start
can
and see what's available.
decide and see what's
But
available.
have an afternoon work session on the 19th.
Yeah.
I think that'll work fine.
Yeah, so
And
we'll
what
be able
time-
to.
What time in the evening are you
We
looking
can
to start?
probably make,
If you're talking
On the
evening?
19th, we're
we
gonna
can
start
probably
immediately
make
after.
quicker
No,
progress
but you,
on this than
we're gonna have
you
night
really
work
think.
sessions.
Yeah.
What time do you,
Not, we already
will
went
we
through
be
the
starting?
Say 6 to 9?
6 is fine.
Yeah.
6 to 8 will be fine.
6 till we're done. Yeah.
Yeah, I just think that we, as long as we're doing this in a fashion where we're not being, saying, oh, we're gonna do this and do that, be specific like we were with the budget.
Sure.
The dates were available, the public was notified.
Yep.
And it just needs to be clear up front. And I'm willing to do the work, but I wanna make sure I'm here to be able to do it and have the
Mi-
schedule to do it.
Mr. Matt Holloway, what are the hours that you're looking to start this?
We were
in
just
the
talking
evening?
6 to 9.
Okay.
Are we considering the amendment or not the amendment?
Well, we'll discuss that.
Let's
during the
put that in our
sessions.
work session as we go along and see what everybody thinks about it. I mean, the comp plan says that we're working on it.
Tracy? You want Tracy?
Yeah, can Tracy, can you take part in this conversation a little bit? Not about our meetings, I just want to ask you a question in case you're not here. You work for the Maryland Department of Planning, right? Yes, sir. What guts does this have, what substance does this have toward what we're trying to do toward the tier map? In other words, how is the Maryland Department of Planning going to look at this and say, hey, you passed this with everything in the ag district, basically is tier 4, but now you're trying to pass a tier map that's different. So how's that going to play out with them, with your group, I guess your folks is what I'm trying to
Maybe
say.
Tracy can come up to the
You
mic.
can come up front if you'd like. So
Well,
we can-
because we are on TV,
can
so it'd be
hear you.
nice.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot here tonight, but you're here, so anyway. Right here, up here is good, yeah.
And this is Tracy Gordy with the
Yes.
Maryland Department of Planning.
Lower Eastern Shore Regional Office. I agree, you're correct. We would clearly be looking at the land use plan that you've included in your comprehensive plan. If you elected to include a priority preservation area element, we would be looking at that as well, because we would be looking at your tier map based on the consistency with your other, with your comprehensive plan and your other elements of your comprehensive plan. So yes, we would have an issue, of course, if you submitted a tier map
It was
that
less
showed,
restrictive.
right, that showed tier 3 areas in an area that may be designated as your priority preservation area. Yes.
Just like you would with the current adopted
Yes.
plan.
You'll still compare it to the current plan as well?
Whatever
Whatever's there.
plan, whatever plan is in effect.
But also the zoning as well.
Yes.
It's not just land use, it's
Right.
zoning as
So,
well, it's what's existing.
The more restrictive our comp plan is, the more restrictive our tier map has to be.
That's the
Potentially,
argument
yes.
we're making,
Yes.
that your 98 plan
It's less.
is more restrictive
Than the 08 plan, or
than the
14 plan,
draft,
yeah,
yes.
yeah.
And since I'm up here, I'm going to use this opportunity to ask, did the planning commission review MDP's comments and have an opportunity?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. In fact, I have the sheet at home.
Okay. Has the council had an opportunity to review MDP's comments?
No.
No.
I would recommend that you do that.
Do we
And
We have a
that,
copy of those
I think that would give you some insight into, what our concerns were, specifically with respect to the land use element. So
Well, and Tracy, I agree, I think we need to see all sides of it, not just your concerns, but our landowner concerns.
Absolutely.
And then make a informed
I guess-
decision here,
I guess
and
my-
environmental concerns.
My question is, why wasn't that supplied to us with this?
Because we're at the point where we just introduced this plan. It's not required. We've taken the majority of their comments, as we will go over at work session. We have incorporated them into the plan. As you will see, the majority of their comments are typos and proofreading, which we really appreciate. However, we are comfortable because, again, they were part of the commission's discussion. They will be provided to this council. It's not a thing of not wanting to disclose. And you can have at them and see where you're at with that.
I mean, how hard was it to put a piece of paper in here?
Well, those comments were to the planning commission,
We're
correct?
to the commission,
And the-
however,
Yeah.
it's
And
not very
actually-
hard to provide them at all.
Actually, that's not completely accurate. The comments were to the staff, because the comments were submitted as part of the state clearinghouse 60-day review, which you have a requirement to do. And that's requested that you do that prior to the public hearing being held by the planning commission, so that the planning commission has an opportunity, and the public, to see what some of the state's concerns are. It's not just MDP, it's all the state agencies when it goes to clearinghouse review. So we send it out to DNR and to MDE and to MHT and Ag, and everybody has a chance to look at it and express either concerns, compliments, considerations. It's not just all criticism. I don't think it's fair to say it was just an analysis of typos, because I know I personally read every word of that plan and spent a great deal of time looking at it. We compared the plan to all the municipal plans. We compared the land use document to all of the municipal growth elements of your municipalities. We compared it to your SB 236 maps of your municipalities. I mean, it wasn't just typos. We did a pretty thorough analysis to make sure that everything was lining up consistently. And I think if you were to look at the comments, you'd find that we did do a thorough job.
Tracy, do you recall, without having the comments off the top of your head, that for the most part, the plan was consistent with all these things that you're talking about evaluating it against? Aside from the tier map and it not including a tier map. However, when looking at the land use plan as it related to municipal growth elements, as it related to zoning, as it related to the water and sewer plan, do you think that most of the comments that the Maryland Department of Planning made were favorable? Or at least that the plan was consistent with?
There was consistency in some areas. There were some inconsistencies in others. I do believe that we had concerns, and again, I'm recalling here, it's been several months, but I'm recalling that there were some areas that we had concerns over municipal growth areas where maybe the county had designated a land use category for low-density residential. I seem to remember that comment. So
Yes.
to us, that would be an inconsistency.
And I think one of the other comments were areas where there were municipalities that had municipal growth elements that did not absorb or delineate all the land that was currently designated as a county designated growth area, that there might have been an inconsistency there as well, that the county designated growth area was too intense development-wise from a land use perspective.
Again, without going back to the document, it's a little difficult, but I think that if you were to read it, you would see that we did look at all those factors, and we did have some concerns about some inconsistencies. I'm not saying it was widespread, but we did have some concerns. I was asked about 2 months ago to go back through our comments and compare it to the most recent draft, and I did not think a lot of our comments have been incorporated, but that's your prerogative. You don't have to do that. But I do want to make clear, it wasn't just typographical errors. There were some substantial comments that I think you should be aware of.
And Tracy, I appreciate that input. One of my goals here is to adopt, and I want to put it on the table, it's to adopt the comprehensive plan before my term is over, is to make sure that it is consistent. Now, whether special interest groups, the state agrees with whatever decisions the council makes that goes in there, that's up to this council, or not up to the council, it's up to the majority of the council. But I think, and I'm hoping my colleagues all agree, that we want to make it consistent, whatever the verbiage is in it. And I hope we all agree up here that we need to adopt it before this term is over. But to do all that, I really think we do need to have these work sessions on it. I think we need to hear from all diverse groups that are interested as we're going through the work sessions. I think, and I'm going to say this again, there's a lot in there. There's a lot of lofty goals in there that this county may never be able to accomplish in some areas. But the most controversial area is the land use.
Yes.
So, I hope we get information and we can get through it. And with that said, I want to thank you all for your input and everything. Oh, Matt, you were supposed to say that.
Anybody else?
Give me a moment here. It's 8:30, getting late.
You don't want to stay till 11 or 12?
No.
We can get this done.
Cherie?
Now, you brought it up, Stevie, 3 to 4 or 5 nights a week. Let's keep it real.
All right, are we done?
Yeah, everyone else is leaving, so we need to leave.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Jack? Good job.